right now they are two separately maintained programs, and the board itself, we don't make any workers' compensation payments. We do administer the laws and have regulations and guidelines for payments.
Department of Administrative Services then.
They're the ones that write the checks, yeah.
Checks, so they would have something posted in there to cover the workers' comp claims.
For all state employees, no matter what the injury.
Any other questions?
I'd be glad to answer any about the FY07, but you want to save that for another day, I'm sure.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
You know, we talked earlier about this workers' compensation fee schedule.
Right.
I did have some questions about that. I guess about 4.5 years ago, the burden reimbursement levels were removed from that, and apparently the board's trying to put those back in.
Right. There's been a recommendation for that from our medical advisory committee.
What is the reasoning behind doing that?
Because over the last year, we developed a new fee schedule for physicians, providers, and for hospital providers through a contract with a company called Ingenex. That's their specialty. And they produced data, and they met with our medical advisory committee on the physician's fee schedule, which was rolled out, Stan, in
2005,
July 2005. The hospital fee schedule came out later. Without the burn codes initially, the medical committee has asked that be studied and looked at too, and to consider putting those back in there. That's an issue before the board, and we're consulting with policy analysts, the governor's policy staff, as well as Department of Community Health.
On that medical subcommittee, that's who's recommended.
The advisory council, right. They are volunteers who help the board in a lot of ways in different areas of expertise. It has payers on it as well as providers.
How is that advisory committee set up to begin with, and who appoints those people and how they get on it?
Yeah, I guess I'm the appointor. The advisory council first started to become formed when Jim Oxendine was the chairman of the board. Then when Hal Dawkins was chair, he kind of put more people on it and gave them more responsibilities, and they've really stepped up to the plate. We couldn't get by without the people that help us in all the different aspects. We have about 6 committees. We try, unlike on the medical committee, we try to have representation from providers and representation from payers.
I have seen a list of the people that are on that advisory committee that would appear that it's heavily favored toward employees and insurance companies. And what I've seen only shows, I think, two representatives who are not, and that's from Georgia Hospital Association and by one of the children's hospitals. Is that correct?
On the medical committee, I thought there's some physicians.
There's physicians, there's some attorneys. The Georgia Hospital Association, Joe Parker, that's the whole, he represents the whole
Yeah, I can get you a copy of the entire list, but there are several physicians on there as well.
How many people are on it?
On the medical committee total, I'm not sure. We try to have each entity represented by someone, and a lot of times, like, I'll get a letter from someone saying they'd like to be on, or I'll get a letter from someone saying they'd like to resign, they're too busy, or someone doesn't come to any meetings over a year. We send them maybe a nice thank you letter.
I want to ask you, are the reimbursement levels in the fee schedule, are they actually set at hospital charges? How does that work?
Well, I might get Stan to help explain all the math that goes into the DRG codes.
It was based on charges from hospital. Georgia Hospital Association provided Ingenex with the numbers that they used, and our goal was to keep the expenditures budget neutral for all business and payers. Budget neutral meaning we didn't want to spend any more money on the fee schedule than we did in the past. So Georgia Hospital Association gave all their numbers to Ingenex, and they crunched the numbers to come up with a fee schedule based on a methodology that's pretty involved, but it's methodology that's used in Medicare and Medicaid and other, but we use that as a baseline methodology to start with.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at a section of Georgia Code, and it would appear, from what I'm reading, that would be in conflict with what the code says. The code says if I say the word pecuniary liability of the employer for medical, surgical, hospital service, and other treatment required when ordered by the board shall be limited to such charges as prevail in the state of Georgia.
Of what a person would pay or something, I think it would go on to say. And then, I don't know if that's in 204 or 203.
203.
Right. And then in 349205, the statute provides that the board shall adopt guidelines for payment of a fee schedule in a geographic area. Our geographic area we chose is statewide, just from the way kind of Community Health did when they did their hospital reimbursement for Medicaid. And it says that we can consult with medical advisors, and so that's what we did.
Well, I guess as it, I don't want to stop anybody asking questions, but just a couple more. I guess as one of the reasons I'm asking, the most important reason I'm asking these questions is how it might affect the state budget. And it would seem to me that going to the fee schedule, it's not based on charges, that there would be a lot of mediation and litigation that would occur in the future. Isn't that true that you could actually be coming back and asking us at some point for money, or actually having to spend state funds for the additional mediation and litigation that might occur?
Right. Actually, the main litigation or mediation that we have over charges is over those charges that are not in the fee schedule.
Just one final thing.
And again, and I'll say again, under the code and other law, the fee schedule is a guideline. It gives the payer gives the employer, I can pay this and not be subject to penalties. It doesn't mean that somebody can't ask, for more.
That's my point.
Right, but right now they ask different ways, and we do a lot of mediations.
That's the point I'm trying to get to, is the guideline, and therefore it invite itself, it would seem to me, to more costs through mediation and litigation, because there would be the difference between actual costs
Right.
and the fee schedule. And what I've seen, and I won't go on about this, but from what I've seen, there could be tremendous amounts of differences between those. Isn't that true?
There could be. I mean, generally, if you go under your health benefit plan to a hospital or a doctor, and you get the bill and you see what the bill is and you see what your plan pays and how they discount it, that's really how the way that really works for all of us in business or for the state.
Well, I appreciate the answer. I do
Okay.
answer that. So the medical advisory board they've made recommendations.
Right.
Is that right? Where in the process is this right now? They made recommendations. What happens next? When will that happen?
Well, I guess right now it's really with me and Judge Massey and Judge Drew, and along with the governor's policy staff.
So there's no, can't give us a clue when it might, if the recommendation's been made, is it something that might happen next month or next month?
It could.
6 months from now?
It could. We would like to get an answer one way or the other within the next 30 days, yeah.
Well, one final question.
All right.
Do you feel
You can have another final question, as many as you'd like. Yeah. Okay, it's fine.
I'll leave it optional. Do you think that all the parties involved in this have had an opportunity to be heard? I assume this medical advisory board they've had some kind of hearings.
They've had meetings, and we've had several meetings, on this topic in particular, with participation from everyone, including the Augusta Hospital.
People just come in and sign it. That wasn't final question. This is a sub-question.
You're right. Okay.
People just come in and sign up for it to speak, or how do they get?
It's informal. They can come and talk, and we want as much data and as much hard data as we can get. We want to make sure that the workers' comp reimbursement is reimbursing somewhere in the range of, other insurance plans, whether it's the state health benefit plan, and we've gotten some numbers on what the state health benefit plan reimburses to this hospital, as well as Medicaid. But we want to be, comparative to to a regular insurance plan. That's why the state health benefit plan is one guideline, you know, and what other insurance PPOs would pay. We want workers' comp to be competitive with that, right? We don't want the cost on the employers to be too high because it's a mandatory coverage. They don't have any option of carrying it or not, and we want the providers, whether institutional or individual, to get reimbursed in a similar manner as they would be reimbursed by other insurance programs. We just think that's fair.
Well, thank you, and I hope that we would hope that all parties would have the opportunity, would have the opportunity.
Right. We're always open to receive more data. We've got more data on this than.
It just seems to me, I know that a couple of years ago, maybe some of the other members of the subcommittee, we went down to Augusta and we went through that firm.
I mean, it's no question about the quality of the facility at all.
We wouldn't want anything to happen to bring the quality of that facility down, the treatment that they provide. It's just a terrible injury, terrible. I just couldn't believe that we walked through there.
Right.
And
Yeah, I've been provided over the last 4 or 5 years lots of pictures from them.
But we are concerned about, of course, it's our job, it's our mission, it's our assignment to be concerned about taxpayer money, how it's how much
Right.
we spend and how much we might incur by different actions. So
Right.
we are concerned about that. We have a concern about these proposed changes, and I would ask you to notify us. I would ask you to notify me and the members of the subcommittee and myself, in ample time before you take any action. And I
Right.
appreciate you answering questions and coming here.
Well, I'm happy to come anytime you have questions for me and talk about it and bring you as much data as you want, and that you understand that our mission is to get good quality health care for every injured worker in Georgia, whether they're a state employee or not a state employee, and that all businesses, including the business of the state, reimburses at a level that's fair for the payer and the provider.
Thank you. If you would just keep us informed, and we may have to, maybe something needs to be addressed through legislation or whatever. But we just ask you to keep us informed. And I do appreciate you answering the question. Are there any other questions?
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And if you want, before the 07 presentation, to be provided with any additional data, we'll be glad to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for coming today. We all know you. If you've introduced yourself and tell us the mission of the Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name's Noel Holcomb. I'm Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and with me today is Dr. Carol Couch. She's the Director of the EPD, Environmental Protection Division, and she will be speaking to part of our supplemental budget. First, I just do want to mention the mission of the department. Our mission is to preserve and conserve the natural and cultural resources of the state, and also provide quality recreational opportunity to citizens. I think the Department of Natural Resources is one of those agencies that touches almost all of the 10 million citizens of this state in some way, whether you're talking about clean water, clean air, recreational opportunities on a state park, in our coastal resources, or on the wildlife management areas throughout the state. We have several divisions that provide these customer services: Historic Preservation Division, Parks and Historic Sites Division, the Wildlife Resources Division, Coastal Resources Division, Environmental Protection Division, and the Pollution Prevention Assistance Division that works primarily with industry to reduce the pollution stream coming from those industries. We also have a land conservation unit that's in the Commissioner's office that is working with the new land council that the Governor established last year that works to procure land either through fee simple ownership or through conservation easements or other means in our conservation toolbox. We've got about 3,000 employees in the agency. That's including all the divisions. We manage well over 1 million acres of land. About 300,000 of that is state-owned. We're here to talk about the supplemental budget, and unless there's some questions about our mission, I'll move into that. Okay, first I want to bring to your attention that we have in the supplemental $1 million to provide funds for replacing 50 high-mileage vehicles. That's scattered through 3 of those divisions: Coastal Resources Division, Parks Division, and the Wildlife Resources Division. Secondly, I want to mention a $665,966, which is a payment that we will receive. If you remember, you may have seen it in the paper this year or this summer about the sale of Lake Lanier Islands and the bond payment that we receive from Lake Lanier Islands. That is a funding source for the department. The bond has been paid off, but as I said, as a funding source, the governor is moving to put this money, this is a step toward putting that money back in the state appropriated funds as opposed to using a stream of income from Lanier Island, since that has been paid off a few years ago. And finally, I want to mention the Wildlife Endowment Fund. As you know, there's an endowment fund set up that collects the revenues from the sale of lifetime licenses. That money is held in principal, and then the trust, or the interest from that money, can be used for land acquisition and other conservation purposes. We receive those monies after we know the prior year how many licenses were sold, and then we can determine how much money needs to be put in that fund. This year it's $579,650. Is there any questions about those items other than the ones that Dr. Couch will discuss related to the Environmental Protection Division? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. And I know it's a huge agency and all that you regulate. At times, I have heard, I'm referring to the Wildlife Endowment Fund. Does this money in any way go to any other private organizations or anything like that? There's just been some confusion at times about that.
Well, I think you may be confusing that with another fund. This particular money is fairly new. No money has ever gone anywhere from this fund. It's fairly new. There's only been $180,000 of interest accrued over the lifetime of this project. I think you're referring perhaps to the non-game fund. There's no state dollars in the non-game fund. We generate all those dollars through fundraisers, the tags that you see on the road with the eagle and the flag. And the answer to that question is no. There's no money goes to any other sources. We use that for funding non-game programs throughout the state of Georgia, but no,
Is that in the category?
there's no state funds in that program. It comes under the Wildlife Resources Division, but there are no state funds in that program.
Because at times that's where we're hearing the rumors.
That's correct.
All right, so absolutely no money is going.
Absolutely no money.
Thank you. And the vehicles, when we're talking vehicles, when you explained that to me, you weren't talking Crown Vics, you were talking pickups.
We're talking, yes, ma'am. The majority of our fleet is pickup trucks. We do have a very nominal amount of sedans. I think right now on my list of individuals in the Wildlife Resources Division, and that's really the only place where there are any sedans. There's about 10 people out of the 600 or so people in Wildlife Resources that could have a sedan, and those are colonels in our law enforcement because they travel and carry people to various meetings. About 90 to 95% of our passenger vehicle fleet is pickup trucks that you associate either with state parks operations, wildlife management operations, or law enforcement conservation rangers in the various counties.
And you explained for other things, it's pretty much their offices.
Yes, that's correct.
And you're just a large agency, which explains that, and you have extensive knowledge on this.
Absolutely. We have not received any appropriations for vehicles in our agency since I believe 2002. Consequently, most of our vehicles are at least 4 years old, but 90% of our vehicles are about over 5 years, 135,000. This is a very modest step in getting us on the right track, and we're very appreciative for this. Yes, sir.
Following the tracking sheet on that, I'm looking at line item number 208, I suppose. I see the governor's recommendation is 39,000, and you're asking for an additional million.
No, sir. That is a little bit confusing. We're asking, the governor's recommendation is $1 million. As you look through your tracking sheets, you'll see that show up in 3 places, I believe. There is 208 is for vehicles for coastal resources. Then if you look down to line 224, you'll see vehicles for parks, and then flip over to the next page, line 231, where the bulk of the vehicles are, is vehicles for the Wildlife Resources Division. Those 3 lines total $1 million.
Okay. And you speak of pickups, I've seen a few pickups that have a King Ranch medallion on them. There wouldn't be any of those.
There wouldn't be any of those. In fact, most of them are just the custom cab. We do have a handful of crew cabs, but those are exclusively used for our K9 unit, so the dog has a place to sit. But they're all basic pickups. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Representative Smith.
And I'm trying to understand what happens when you have state funds that you're able to match and put down federal dollars. And I guess where I'm going with this, and it's not intended to be a softball question, but can we improve that? Can we bring down more federal dollars to our state if we have more state funds? And where would you like to?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer, I'll probably have to get some specific information from you, but I think what you're alluding to is that we get a great deal of money from federal appropriations, and those involve a match. Some of them are 50-50 match, some are 3-to-1 match. Pittman-Robinson funds for wildlife resources, for every dollar we put up, we get $3 from the federal government, based on a pool of money that's that is determined by the size of the state and the number of hunting and fishing licenses. So there are some of those federal dollars where we could earn more of them if we had additional state dollars to provide the match. Off the top of my head, I cannot tell you which of those funds we could tap into more dollars to, but right now, unless you know one off the top of your head, we'll get that to you. But I did not bring that information with me.
And I'm going to this next question.
Okay. Yes.
Explain to me that our state budget crosses over 2 federal budgets. I mean, there are 2 federal budgets that are passed by the time we pass our state budget, and those matching funds are not realized until the match is actually made. So, explain a little bit more, because I think we're going to hear more of that.
And that is a good question, and it is a very complicated question, and one I will try to answer, but you're right. The funds, for instance, that I just alluded to, the Pittman-Robinson funds, are determined based on the number of licenses we sell each year. We have to send a certification to federal government that we sold X number of licenses. That's plugged into a formula that all the states compete for a pool of money. Obviously, the more licenses we sell, the more money we get, because the other part of that equation is land area. That doesn't change each year. So as we sell more licenses or fewer licenses, it impacts how much money we can get that we need that match for. And you're also correct in the fact that the federal budget year is from October 1 until September 30th. So at any time, we're dealing with not only our budget we're in, but also 2 different federal budgets. Because of the dynamic nature of these federal fund sources, we cannot predict next year how much money we may earn, because we don't know how many licenses we may sell. You may recall that hunting and fishing licenses have been on a gradual decline over a number of years. So we struggle whenever we give licenses away, or for whatever reason somebody doesn't buy a license, we struggle to reach that match. And if we hardlined in some number and pick one out of the air, $4 million into our base budget, it would complicate things if we couldn't earn that. The other complicating thing about federal dollars, and this year is an excellent example of that, State wildlife grants, typically our land and water funds, we may get on an average year 1 million, 2 million, or whatever the case may be in a particular category. This year, because of Hurricane Katrina and other things, most of those federal dollars have been, I won't say arbitrarily, but the organizations that disperse those have been told cut those back by some figure, 7% or 3% or whatever goal they may have had. So we went into this year thinking we may be getting $1 million to run this program, and now we'll only get $700,000 to run the program. So putting those in as a fixed part of our base is, in our opinion, not a good idea. It also reduces our flexibility of moving between programs.
So and we're hearing this argument now, and it's what is the true budget for the state of Georgia? And your agency is just one example, probably, and why that is very difficult to say. And if I'm understanding what you're telling me and the rest of the members here, if you are required to hardline, which means actually put a dollar number in the budget that's a federal dollar number, that in fact might not be realized.
That's exactly correct.
But how can we, as legislators, understand? There seems to be a need for a balance there. We probably do want a true picture. Not that we probably do. It would be good to have a true picture of the dollars that go into all of our programs. So would we do the budget as we're doing now, but then have a separate category whereby we
Well, there is.
the previous year and what monies you did get down? Would that
You see that, and we work very closely with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget as we get those monies and where they're placed. Those have very tight controls on what they can be used for. It's very transparent where those dollars go. But we can't account for every single dollar that we get from federal. We have to them, and that is provided through the Office of Planning and Budget as well.
So when we as legislators are hearing the argument, we really need to have a budget that shows the full amount of money that each agency has.
You have that.
We have that, but what I'm beginning to understand that if we require that the federal funds be hardlined or actually listed as an item in the budget, that makes it difficult for the numbers to be not difficult. Well, it's a harder management situation for y'all, and that you would be constantly amending in and out these dollars to try and reflect
That's correct.
the nuances of the federal level, where there are no nuances in the state. I understand.
And for instance, and I think in a conversation I may have had with you some time ago, for instance, some of those dollars can be used for law enforcement. Some programs can. The boating safety, for instance, dollars that we get can be used for law enforcement type activities. Other dollars cannot be. And again, I don't want to speak for Dr. Couch, and she may be able to shed a little more light this on her particular agency, but they have very close scrutiny on them about what they can and can't be used for. So it's not just as simple as moving some amount of money from one program to another. It may be inappropriate at the federal level to do that, is one reason that this becomes a very cumbersome project.
So in the end, follow the format we've always followed with the state budget, but maybe there could be a category somewhere in the budget that we're reviewing now that would reflect the federal dollars captured the previous fiscal year.
I think you have that.
Okay, so where?
You're right.
It would, so do we have to look for it everywhere, or is there
It doesn't provide it, and you're getting me into my knowledge way beyond my knowledge base, and we'll probably have to talk to the Office in Planning and Budget about how to best do that. It doesn't show it necessarily by individual federal funding source, but you do have certainly those tracking documents that tell you how much money was amended in at the end of that year.
Okay, so we can essentially take the side of the argument of the way the budget is now being done and understand that as long as we know where the federal dollars are, then we have a true picture of the budget. But if we as an appropriations committee of the General Assembly insist on hardlining all the federal dollars, then we have restricted and complicated your ability to function as an agency.
Absolutely.
I still don't understand it all, but at least I said it made some sense, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Couch at this time if there's no further questions.
I think we do have, do you have a question?
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
I want to pass this on to Dr. Couch. I think Representative Smith and I were looking at
Where are you on this?
I'm running off of the little, I'm gonna wait and see if that, you don't have it on this property.
He's looking at the governor's documents that I sent to him.
Which and what's he talking? Excuse me.
Page 83 of that.
This gets to what we were talking about last year. The Senate put we normally provide certification of our amended. Well, I won't say certification. Historically, as we amend in budget dollars at various times of the year, and it's not always federal dollars. Historically, the House took our First Amendment and used that as our base. Last year, the Senate captured a lot of those federal dollars much later in the year. It didn't coincide with what the governor's dollars were on his budget. What you're seeing is the governor's intent to put those federal funds back where they were and work off of Amendment 1 and the traditional federal dollars that were in our base. And Ms. Smith, there are some federal dollars in our base, and they've been in for quite some time. So this is the governor's effort to put those monies back the way the House had always done this. And the bulk of these dollars are, you are correct, are in EPD.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Blackie.
I'm back.
Ask your question, answer your question. Representative Smith, ask another question.
Would you clarify what your agency, or and you probably speak for other agencies, the process you go through when you're talking about amend in and amend out, what does that really, how does that work?
When we receive monies from whatever source, and here we're talking primarily about money, we have to work with the Office of Planning and Budget to amend those in to our budget in order to be able to spend them. We do that at various times of the year. And the first amendment that we amend in is typically in late July, is that right? Or sometime in late July. That's the one that has typically been used for our base budget. These monies come in at various times of the year because of the federal budget cycle and for other dollars that we may receive. For instance, monies that we may generate off of the ferry service at Sapelo Island as we amend those in. So it's a matter of when you capture those and when you plug them into our base.
Thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner? Commissioner, we appreciate you coming. Before you do leave, just to ask you what I'm trying to remember to ask every agency to come. Is there anything you can identify in here for us as we try to save taxpayer money and get some of their tax money back to them? Is there anything you can identify in your budget that might need to be cut?
Well, I don't really, I think I understood the magnitude of this comment by my predecessor. The short answer to that is no, but DNR employees invented copper wire by stretching pennies, and I fully understand the magnitude of that statement now, and so the short answer is no. I seriously, in all seriousness, I think we exercise tremendous conservative constraint in operating our program.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you need to, I know you have EP. Do you have any other of your sub-agencies? What we talking about?
The attached agencies, I'm going to stay for Dr. Couch's presentation and any questions you may have, but I had not intended to stay for the attached agencies, but there are some here. Yes.
Thank you. If you would introduce yourself to us and tell us a brief description of the mission of your agency.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Carol Couch. I'm the Director of the Environmental Protection Division within the Department of Natural Resources. Recently, the overall mission statement of Environmental Protection Division was given a thorough review both internally and externally. And the mission of EPD, in concert with the overall mission of the Department of Natural Resources, is this. Our basic mission is to restore and to protect and restore Georgia's environment. We take the lead in ensuring clean air, water, and land with our partners. we pursue a sustainable environment that provides a foundation for a vibrant economy and healthy ecosystems. The overall scope of activities we have in the department is on behalf of the citizens of Georgia to administer about a portfolio of about 26 federal and state laws that are comprehensive of both regulations in the area of air, land, and water, as well as other types of responsibilities that relate to safety of the citizens of the state of Georgia. An example of that might be our Safe Dams program. I'd like to turn attention to several budget items if there are no specific questions regarding EPD's mission and responsibilities. The first thing I would like to discuss with you is the governor's budget recommendations in the area of the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Before speaking specifically about the recommendations in the governor's budget, I wanted to overview for a minute the authorized uses of the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. There are about 4 basic uses that are applied, for which the trust funds are applied in statute. One basic application is the providing assistance and support to a sister division of the Department of Natural Resources, the Pollution Prevention Assistant Division, which by statute receives 10% of any of the fees collected that have been appropriated to EPD. Pollution Prevention Assistance Division provides important services to assist industries in the state to actually reduce emitted pollution in their processes. The second major application for which the supplemental funds that we're requesting that the governor is requesting are actually for the major second purpose I'll be discussing. The statute provides that local governments are eligible to seek reimbursement for costs associated with investigating and cleaning up contaminations from old landfills. The kinds of things that they might do with those funds include treating groundwater, which would include pumping, treating, monitoring. Long-term sampling and testing of these contaminated landfills through time is necessary to assure that they are stable and not growing in extent and properly managed as far as the potential spread of contamination into the air, land, and water. The funds are also used by local governments to cap and seal landfills, to install recovery wells, trenches, and do other kinds of engineering that require to stabilize and manage through time of these legacy landfills. A third application of the funds are for purposes of actually supporting the work of EPD to provide the operation of the program. EPD staff do a diversity of functions. We provide technical oversight both to cleanup activities that are being conducted on hazardous sites that are abandoned by private parties. In addition, for private party landfill cleanups, we work with a diversity of engineering companies that have been hired to clean those up to provide oversight on corrective management plans. We're also involved in compliance monitoring and review. Finally, resources are applied to abandoned landfills that have no responsible party and for which the state of Georgia acts to provide resources through the trust fund for cleanup. In sum total, currently, there are about 253 landfills that are across the state of Georgia that are under the category of having local government responsibility and would be therefore subject to being available for reimbursement of costs to those governments for cleanup of those landfills. Of those, 123 have contamination to such an extent that they're actually listed on the state's hazardous site inventory. They become listed on the site inventory in relationship to objectively assessed degree to which there's actual risk to citizens drinking the water or being exposed. And generally this involves the landfills being in proximity to community or domestic drinking water supplies. Most of the sites that local governments are eligible to receive reimbursement fund under the fund are related to landfills that historically predate the time of required liners of the landfill, so they are unlined. The purposes and uses of the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund are comprehensive of these activities. The focus of the governor's recommendation for supplemental funding this year is largely to address the reimbursement to roughly 104 local government applications for their costs associated with one or more of the type of purposes that I discussed earlier. In sum total, the amount of the request that is in the governor's proposed budget of a little more than $8.3 million would largely go to reimbursements of 104 local governments. 10% of that amount by statute would go to P2AD, and a small amount of that, less than $200,000 in total, would be applied toward continuing work on one additional ongoing hazardous waste cleanup, which is called the Hargis site in Wilkerson County. That provides you an overview of the trust fund in general, its purposes, and specifically on the intent of the application of funds requested in the FY06 supplemental. Be happy to answer any questions on that. Yes.
I have no idea what P2AD was. And for all of us here, it is a very pro-business, very active organization. Could you explain, agency, so could you explain in a little bit more detail, because I didn't understand its importance to good business in Georgia.
P2AD stands for Pollution Prevention Assistance Division. It is a division of the Department of Natural Resources. The origin of the division was, and its statutory focus, if you will, is to reduce the amount of hazardous waste generated in the state of Georgia. In order to accomplish that, it does a number of things. First of all, it provides a diversity of technical resources to businesses to help them achieve reductions in pollutants and hazardous waste generated, and so that is largely their focus. I can provide a lot more specific information on that, but every dollar that is applied and able to be used by P2AD actually has a direct effect on the bottom line of a large number of Georgia companies. A reduction in the amount of waste that they generate is one less resource that they have to invest dollars in disposal of. So it has benefits not only to Georgia's environment, but also directly influence the bottom line of industry in the state.
And it's a voluntary program. They join it?
It is a voluntary program. It is also a program that, since I've come into this position 2 years ago, I've sought to work with the division director, Bob Donahue, in partnership to achieve some enhancements to how the activities of P2AD can be advanced to actually incentivize a greater environmental compliance on regulations. And we've been working with P2AD and in Region 4 environmental offices here to analyze the extent to which good performance and reduction in compliance and regulation can actually be, in a sense, incentivized and rewarded by a flexibility in some of the regulatory requirements we have. So that's an active area that we're examining at the moment. You're welcome.
I'm looking at the way it's worded on these lines about the expenditures for the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund and its movement to the Environmental Protection Program.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's an excellent question, and I'm glad you brought that up in conversation. The programs of the Department of Natural Resources are organized in divisions, and we have programs. And so our programs are our hazardous waste branch, our land protection branch. These are your programs in the way that our budgets are organized. What we're trying to do here is reconcile the fact that our program budgeting is not really consistent with the fact that these are trust funds. They're funding sources. They're not really programs. We manage them under programs, and so we're trying to essentially bring in line the fact that these are funding sources, not programs. So it's really a misnomer to be calling them programs and having them itemized in the budget because they're funding sources. I'm.
It's not, what you take in is not always spent in hazardous waste, correct? And I know it's not your choice. I mean, it's the steps taken to balance the budget at years. The rating of the funds, what in years past?
I believe what you're speaking to is the we have collected over the last several fiscal cycles more in the fee sources that go into these trust funds that have been appropriated back.
One of the statements I heard is that the legislative intent was that the money collected always be used for the purpose in which it was collected, but since it's not a constitutional program, trust fund, that that means that at times those monies can be used elsewhere because they really are collected into the general fund. I don't know if I'm getting this right or not.
Well, the fees that are collected are accrued to the general fund and accounted for under the trust funds. So they are general fund dollars. However, we do account for them in terms of the trust fund. The trust fund is not a lockbox. You're quite right. The legislative intent is to apply these to the authorized uses, both in the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund as well as in the Solid Waste Trust Fund, which we'll talk about subsequently. You're welcome.
She got into sort of questions I was going to ask. Thank you for being here, ma'am. And I'm having a real hard time understanding this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be tracking documents from them. She was talking about 311, 312, and we look at let's go to 214 to start with. Remove undesignated object class and fund sources to properly affect expenditure. It looks like we were taking away $49 million out of your Environmental Protection Agency. If I'm looking on page 83 of the governor's budget, so that's $49 million. You're going from an $86 million budget, $20 million state funds, and it looks like giving back nearly $50 million in federal government money. What's the deal with that?
Well, Representative, I don't have the document you're referring to, so it's going to be hard for me to address your question specifically. I think it was generally discussed. Yeah.
That's the Amendment 2 thing that Norm just talked about.
Right. Yes. Well, just please go ahead.
I've got some more, but let her answer this one.
Okay, I'm going to go to Representative Hurd, and then I'll come back. I'm sorry. Okay.
I think there's a lot of shuffling going on inside your budget. But the essence of it goes down to 215, where on the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, you're going from 7.6 million up to 15.9 million. My question then is, in the net increase of $8-some odd million, I'd like to hear this. You went through in good detail the general description of where the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund money is.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate that. I would like to hear more specifically where you're going to be targeting that additional $8 million.
The additional $8 million, let me review that for you. I addressed it in my earlier comments, but let me go back over that to clarify. Of the $8.3 million increase in the supplement that the governor's requesting here, about $7.3 million of that would be applied toward reimbursing local governments the 104 local governments that have landfills that are in some stage of cleanup, monitoring, assessment. The 10% of the $8.3 million by statute is applied toward activities by P2AD. The balance of the funds, a little less than $173,000, would be applied toward additional costs to assist with the cleanup of an ongoing site that we're cleaning under the continuation dollars of Hargis landfill in Wilkerson County.
Okay, I thought your description was related to the total hazardous waste trust fund. That description applies specifically to the 8 million.
Yes, I'm here to discuss the supplemental request. Now, I believe the question you had earlier has not been addressed.
No, this was separate, yes, ma'am. And my colleague said this was maybe something the Senate had misconstrued or done something with, but what's the answer to the $49 million?
Well, Commissioner Holcomb addressed that earlier in his questioning, and let me try to say it in my own language and maybe keep me out of trouble here. But essentially, in the Senate formation of the budget, federal dollars that would have been amended in later in the year were put into the continuation budget, and this would rectify that by bringing those dollars back out. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. We didn't refer to a line at the time, so I can understand that.
Wastewater treatment plants, does that come through?
Yes.
Approvals come through your area?
Different types of permits related to wastewater treatment plants. Yes.
We can talk about this later, but I'm aware of a fairly large county in the state that's been trying to get a permit for probably a year or more.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we check, it's on somebody's desk. It's like number 17 on someone's desk. It's working from the top down. Can't get any answers back because he hasn't gotten to that level yet. Two problems I have when the people that talk to me say they ask for an information sheet or a checklist when they come in to apply for the permit. There's no such animal. You just fill out basically what you think I'm going to want to look at, send it in, I'll review it. If it doesn't meet my approval, then I'll send you back a letter telling you I need something else. That doesn't sound like a good way to run the railroad to me. I know going to our local zoning offices, we get ready to permit something, they give us a checklist every time we run a meeting. So I've got some specific information on that, but I just wanted to mention that we need to look at increasing personnel in some areas, but we got counties out there that are trying to get permits done, and they're being jerked around that way. That doesn't make me very happy. So I just wanted to pass that on, and we need to.
I'd be very pleased to sit down with you, talk about the specifics of this one, to see where the issues might lie, and to see if we can evaluate the circumstances and work with you. So I'll seek to make an appointment with you. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Representative Black.
Back to the question of these solid waste fees and hazardous waste fees, what's the total effect for this year?
Let me get that for you. In the hazardous waste trust fund, we are collecting this year, for 2005, which is the last statistic I have, the hazardous waste trust fund was $15.9 million in fees collected. And I believe you also asked about the solid waste trust fund. The solid waste trust fund for 2005, $6.5 million.
22.4
Pardon me?
22.4 million total,
I believe that would be right.
and we're spending $8 on the hazardous and 2.5 on the solid waste.
The $8.3 million that I've discussed on the hazardous waste is being applied in the supplemental request is in addition to the base budget that was already approved in the 06 continuation budget. Okay. And a similar type of situation would be in place for the solid waste. We are operating some components of the activities of authorized uses under the continuation budget, and I'd be prepared to discuss with you, if depending on how you'd like to handle questions, a solid waste trust fund.
The two of those funds were total in the budget here to spend a little over $20 million in this budget. That's correct, 16 in the hazardous and 4 total in the solid waste.
Which numbers are you adding together?
I was adding the solid waste and the hazardous waste trust fund.
It's on page 84 of the governor's budget, which you may not have.
I do not have it. Oh, I do have it.
Yeah, it's on 84, the next page.
Well, it doesn't show the total, it just shows the increase.
The 20 million he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I understand your question now. The continuation budget for the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund is $7.6 million. The supplemental budget for the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund I just overviewed for you would be the 8.3, totaling a little bit more than $16 million. For solid waste, our continuation appropriation for 06 was 1.5, and we have a governor's recommendation for $2.5 million, which would bring the total spending for 06, if approved, to a little bit more than $4 million, or in total, a little bit more than $20 million.
Where I was headed with that, we're still putting a little over $2 million out of fees and collection, and converting them into the general, keeping them in the general fund. They all come into the general fund.
There is more collected in total fees than is under this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I keep wanting to go back to what I feel like is an argument that this, our appropriations committee needs to understand. And essentially, it's two different budget philosophies, and I think the Senate's position is to have a true reflection of the budget. We must, in fact, line item or hard line all federal dollars. And on this number 214, where we removed the undesignated object classes, total funds of $59 million. And if we removed, we adjusted 49.9 of that out. The reason that we're having to do this in this budget is because in an effort to define the true budget, we've complicated the process because you can never realize what those dollars actually are. They're just anticipated dollars, which is why it's difficult to make it reflect the hard line in the budget. So we're probably, I guess where I'm headed is there's going to be a philosophical debate between the House and the Senate on this issue. And the only thing I would hope we could do is maybe by one way of solving this is to have some way at some point in time we do know what that true dollar, in an easily to read format, what the true federal dollars were. I don't see how we can ever list that as a hard item in the state budget, but I think we have an obligation to at least understand what each agency does receive in a year. So, and I'm looking at Noel too, because I know all y'all have to work together on that, but that might be one way to help us get beyond that argument we're having. Thank you.
Representative Maxwell.
Yes, ma'am, and my colleague's been trying to explain this to me as we were sitting here too.
I haven't hit him on the head yet.
I'm getting closer, we're working on it. Going back to Representative Black's question, ma'am, I still have a similar question to this on that. As this funds the 7.6 current budget, have all those funds been expended or asked for from the government sources yet, or the people that have these, what's the one I have, hazardous waste in the areas? How much of that funds is, how much of those
Of the continuation budget?
Yes, ma'am, $7.6 million.
Well, we're in the middle of the fiscal year. I don't have a report. I could get you one. I don't know if we would even hazard an estimate of the percentage spent year to date. Yeah.
Much through the year, so I mean, I'd like to know, have we spent half of it, or we spent $7 million and we'll need another $8.3 million by the end of the year? Or we spent $4 million, you know, I'd like to know how far we go along and how these requests come in. If we get too many requests per month, or, I mean, this is doubling the budget for the next 6 months.
The requests that we have in that would be for which the supplemental request, the large fraction of the supplemental would be replied, we already have applications in. Once the funds are available, we will very quickly disperse the money. We have an annual cycle where we ask and local governments estimate the amount of reimbursement that they would like to request. We evaluate it with respect to the criteria that assure us that they are proper requests. So that money will be spent. The continuation, sorry? The $7.6 million is in the continuation budget is applied toward a number of things for those funds that were earmarked to support our personnel services budget. Those would probably be 60% or 50% expended because of where we are in the fiscal year. Some of the other funds are applied toward abandoned site cleanups, and their expenditure and the invoice would be in line with the invoicing of the engineering firms that are doing that work. So it depends on what component we are. So there's probably a different rate of expenditure depending on the uses.
You asked or brought something to light, a little light bulb just went off. That this $7.6 million is not just set aside for hazardous waste, and that takes care of all your, does that include administrative costs and everything else?
Yes, sir. It does. One of the things that EPD staff do is provide technical oversight and the oversight of corrective action plans on a large number of both private and abandoned landfill cleanups. We have these types of individuals will be scientists, geologists, and engineers. And associated administrative overhead. You know, there's some administrative costs as well as costs of just administering the collection of close to $16 million a year in fees.
Will we ever see a breakdown of the total expenses in these areas?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Be happy to provide that to you.
Mentioned and that this extra $8.3 million was to fund some requests that you've had, and that you said this was an annual cycle pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Is this annual cycle where it normally fits with the mid-year budgeting? Like, I mean, right now we're doing this mid-year, and if it's an annual cycle, do they normally turn it in about the same time? So this would be a continuing timing on the annual cycle at the mid portion of the budget? Or did I mishear?
No, I think that's largely correct. Until the amount of appropriated funds into the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund was seriously reduced 3 fiscal cycles ago, it would have been normal for a certain fraction of the program dollars that were appropriated for the authorized to come in the continuation budget, and somewhat on the order of half to come as a supplemental. So this request with the continuation and the supplemental is very similar to the way the trust funds fees were appropriated up until about 3 fiscal cycles ago. So this would kind of put us on track in the kind of the normal course of business in receiving and dispersing the funds.
I guess it seems that I know that the desire of the governor and the committee is to do as little bit as we can at the supplemental budget level and trying to do everything that we can on the big budget. Would it be possible perhaps in the future to try and get those requests in time so that they can be included in the big budget annually, and just change the timing and request that every bid that you want to spend over this year be into your office by a certain time, that would allow it to go through the budgeting process and not have to come back mid-year.
Well, I can't be definitive on that, but I'd be happy to examine the way we would, be able to determine the reimbursable amount in light of the budget cycle. I think that's something we can examine. Be glad to do that.
Easier for us to look at and feel more comfortable with, and get it brought up at one time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Hill. I wanted to ask, I don't see any lights on right now. I wanted to ask about, and you're not looking at the same sheet I am, but the request for $600,000 for the ongoing water-related litigation. I'm just wondering, this kind of relates to the question Representative Hill asked. Are these for charges, bills that your department has received since we approved literally since you made the request for the 2006 general budget? At that time, I don't have it before me, but I assume we probably had money in the original 2006 budget for litigation costs. Is that correct?
Through the 2005 budget period, about $600,000 were appropriated on an annual cycle to provide for funds that would be provided and administered through the law department to reimburse legal and associated expenses with 3 different lawsuits and other activities related to them. The rate of expenditure in those years resulted in an accumulation of dollars. In other words, we were getting more in appropriations than we actually expended in those years. Last, in the preparation of the 06 continuation budget, there were sufficient dollars accrued in reserves that I did not recommend to the governor, and he did not recommend that we ask for an appropriation in that budget. And so the legal expenses that have been ongoing and will be ongoing through the remainder of fiscal through 2005 is still able to be paid for under the reserve amount that was available to the law department because of unexpended uses in previous years. Moving forward, we need to replenish that amount, and we've done some estimates based on the historic rate of the invoicing and some estimates of the kind of legal work that faced the state of Georgia in the 2000 remaining parts of this year and into 2007. And the amount of invoices on average, although they range up and down, are roughly $47,000 a month. So the $600,000 in the continuation provides appropriated source of dollars to be applied to invoices that would be coming in during the period of time that extends into 2007. We're not reimbursing here. We are appropriating dollars that against which we will be obligating and invoicing in the future. Well, we know we're going to have the bills, and we need to have funds identified and appropriated in the same way that, well, the analogy might be in some regard, we know we have reimbursements that we will receive in the future from local governments. And, we anticipate that amount from year to year, and either through the continuation budget or through known requests at the time we do the supplemental, we're able to target that more precisely.
But let me ask you about this litigation. I assume that this is to pay lawyers who the law department has hired contracted with. Is that correct?
The Attorney General. Yes, the Attorney General established a Special Attorney General designation through McKenna, Long, and Aldridge to provide additional legal expertise to support legal services related to the settlement agreement for Lake Lanier, a suit brought by the Alabama against the Army Corps of Engineers, to which Georgia is a party, and also a lawsuit brought by Georgia against the Army Corps of Engineers. In addition to that, those particular cases, the legal service are assisting the Attorney General and the Governor and Governor's General Counsel and myself in legal advice on other matters that relate to assuring that Georgia's interests are being met in FERC relicensure and other matters that are related to the operation of the Chattahoochee and Coosa systems.
In those cases, in this case with these expenses, though, the law department has made a decision to hire the outside law firm. It wasn't something that your department requested. I mean, it's just something that in the litigation process, the law department doesn't have the personnel to the lawyers take care of it. They saw the need to hire outside lawyers.
Yes, yes, and that's commonly done. Well, I believe EPD was probably consulted at the time. This special attorney or SAG agreement has been in place for some time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we do have another question. Somebody down here has a question. Representative Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good day.
Dr. Couch just had a follow-up on the litigation.
Mm-hmm.
Can I not turn? Well, it's turned on. You'll have to use that other one. Get the light on 11 and see if that makes any difference. Representative Goins, we were anticipating this.
It's all right. Dr. Couch.
If you would like to use move to another one, or if you
No.
Okay.
You want this one? I'd be happy to share. Okay.
Just a brief follow-up from the litigation-related question that the chairman brought up. These, and just for clarification, the special assistant attorneys general that are appointed, they're appointed by the attorney general's office whenever a state agency is sued. The attorney general, of course, is the attorney of record with the
Correct.
agency and enjoys the attorney-client privilege with a particular agency in general in the context of litigation. That being said, can you give the committee an idea of how long these, I think you pointed to 3 specific suits, 2 of which the state of Georgia is a defendant, 1 of which the state of Georgia is a plaintiff, correct?
We're not necessarily defendant, but we are parties. We're friends.
Okay. Can you give us an idea generally of how long those 3 particular actions have been going on?
The suit brought by Alabama against the Army Corps of Engineers, to which the state of Georgia is an intervening party, was first filed in 1991. At the time that the interstate compacts for the ACF and ACT rivers were consummated by Congress, Alabama and the parties agreed to stay that. So for most of the 90s up through the end of the compacts, there were no legal actions relative to that particular case. It, however, has renewed with the dissolution of the ACF and ACT compacts. The state of Alabama has renewed that, and we've been actively engaged in federal court in Alabama, the Northern District of Alabama, with the Army Corps of Engineers on receiving complaints relative to that particular case. It is ongoing. It's that particular case that the judge involved put an injunction against the implementation of the settlement agreement reached by parties in Georgia, counties in and around Lake Lanier, and the ARC, which would receive under that settlement agreement a contracted amount of water if certain other requirements were satisfactorily met. A successful environmental impact analysis and other matters related to performance of the contracts that would assure both fiscal and environmental appropriateness in the execution of those contracts. The second case is related to the settlement agreement itself, where Alabama and Florida have sued the Army Corps and parties to the settlement agreement, including the state of Georgia, contending that it is inappropriate and it's not an authorized use of Lake Lanier. That settlement agreement has been appealed. We have won on appeal. We recently won again through another appeal that basically resulted in the judge indicating that upholding the settlement agreement and compelling and requiring the Army Corps of Engineers to begin ensuing actions and requirements to complete the implementation of that agreement so that water can flow under that. We're very near the end of that. We've been very successful through the legal process to this date. There's still some additional actions that Florida and Alabama could take, and we do anticipate they will. Consequently, we have additional legal expenses moving forward. The third case is a case complaint brought by Georgia, a suit from Georgia against the Army Corps of Engineers earlier that compelled them to actually implement the settlement. That case is also stayed. Whether or not Georgia seeks to renew that case and move it forward depends ultimately on our success in getting the settlement agreement implemented.
As far as the funds go that,
Mm-hmm.
that the agency would seek to have a committee apportion out for future uses, as a practical matter going forward, that number really, as a practical matter, is not determined by DNR or EPD. That really is a management function of the Department of Law, and its agreement with the SAG on a particular case, but it gets allocated to you. Is that correct?
It is allocated to the EPD budget, and that is then passed on to the law department, who administers the actual administers the funding, and I think we do actually do the invoicing from EPD, but they sign off and review the work done in the law department. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was clear for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Couch. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Kelly. Appreciate it. Representative Smith has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To understand the, I don't want to use the word importance, but let me rephrase it this way. What would happen to Georgia in the end if we lost any of these cases? What's our worst case scenario? These cases. Why is this so important that these funds be ongoing? What would happen if we couldn't defend ourselves with these issues? What happens to the state's water resources?
Well, Lake Lanier supplies somewhat over half the water resource for the citizens of the state of Georgia, many of which are, of course, in the metropolitan area. Without the implementation of the settlement agreement and other programmatic responsibilities of the Army Corps to assure the proper management of the reservoirs within both the ACF and ACT systems, many of our communities cannot be assured. I'd say half of Georgia could not be assured of a stable source of water, and therefore a stable ability to know what kinds of water-related infrastructure would need to be invested in.
So essentially, these funds are, in a sense, committed funds and will continue until we have resolved these issues throughout this process.
At some level, there, to the extent that the compacts did not resolve our interstate issues between Florida and Alabama, it's very likely that there'll be legal avenues taken by both of those states, one or more of those states.
The appellate court judge is from Alabama or in Alabama?
The appellate is the 11th Circuit Appeals Court in Washington, D.C.
And where's the Alabama?
The
How do we get in front of Alabama and first try to make our case?
Well, these are interstate waters, and the Alabama court has been successful in Alabama has been successful in arguing that it is an appropriate jurisdiction.
So in other words, round one is never weighed in our favor. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's just complicated.
It is, but please remember that with the appeals of the settlement agreement being upheld, we have a major victory and now a court order that would compel the Army Corps to follow through on its obligations.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. I don't see any lights, and if you get out real quickly, you may not have any more questions. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for answering our questions being here today. We appreciate it. Are there any more questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other tax savings to the Department of Resources here that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Thank you. If you would introduce yourself to us and tell us which tax agency you're here on behalf of.
Yes, I'm Mike Froelich, Executive Director of the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agri Center in Perry, Georgia, representing the Georgia Agricultural Exposition Authority. And Mr. Chairman, I'm here on to speak about the $625,000 roadway improvements money that's on the page 86 of the governor's budget. And I'm a firm believer that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if I have your permission, I'd like to pass out some photos. Chairman, members of the committee, the mission of the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agri Center is basically fourfold. Well, one is to showcase agriculture. Two is to provide a facility for 4-H and FFA and our youth groups to show and compete. Third is to provide a facility for year-round activities to promote tourism and economic development. And the fourth, of course, is to put on the annual Georgia National Fair. The photo I gave to you is an example of the Family Motor Coach Association that has been held at the Georgia National Fairgrounds 4 times. First held in 1996, 1999, 2002, and last year, 2005. This RV rally generates about $30 million for the economy of the state of Georgia. It's a very important event for us and for the community. And they are coming back to us in March of 2007. And one of their requests has been to improve the roadway system at the Agri Center, especially in the parking areas. And if you look at this photo, look at the top part of it, you'll see RVs, and at the bottom part you'll see RVs. Those are the 2 areas that we need some roadway improvements. Basically what's happening is the 3 out of the 4 times this rally has been held with us, it has rained. And of course, when it rains out in the parking lots, these RVs and the support vehicles get bogged down in mud. So what we're asking for is $625,000 to provide about 8,000 feet of paved area, 24 foot wide. In addition to helping support the Family Motor Coach, it also will help us during the annual Georgia National Fair. Last year we had 400,000 people attend the fair, and if you look at these RVs in this photo and picture cars there, that's basically what the parking areas would be for the Georgia National Fair as well. So we think it's very important that we can show groups like the Family Motor Coach and also our fairgoers that we do have roadways so they won't get bogged down, and it makes for a much better experience for these people. If this improvement's not made, chances are the Family Motor Coach will not continue to come back to us. They've been coming to our facility every third year. We got them on a 2-year rotation as they come back in March of 2007. The reason we're asking for the money now is so that we can get a jump on it, hopefully take advantage of the upcoming summer season and get these roadways put in before winter, because they'll be here a year coming this March. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about that.
Well, you asked for it, and it's actually in the budget. I mean, it's in the
Yes, it's in the governor's record. Yes, sir.
I want to clarify, you're not asking for it.
No, yes, sir.
It's in the governor's recommendations. Unless somebody has any questions. Representative Ellis Black has a question.
This is not a question, it's just a comment I'd like to make for the Budget Committee. I serve on the legislative oversight for this authority, and I think that we need to commend Mike because they have been moving this operation to a higher percentage of its budget being self-generated. And what we're talking about here is capital improvement, and it's part of the plan to slow the steps, makes this operation become more and more self-supporting. They do got an excellent board, one by the governor, and they do a superb job of managing it.
Thank you.
Representative Hurd. I don't think your mic is coming on. I'm going to turn it on, but I don't think it's working.
Following up on Representative Black's comment, as you become self-sufficient, when do you expect that day to be?
Well, that's hard to say. Right now, we're 80% self-sufficient on our budget. I know a number of years ago when I first started here, the state was providing 80% of our budget. Now we're providing 80% of our own budget. When you look at the big picture, we do, one of our main missions is to support 4-H and FFA activities and so forth. A lot of those events, it's hard to make money off the youth programs, so I think there's always going to be a certain degree of state monies necessary to help us there. We've expanded the facility to 1,030 acres. We have 35 buildings, 750,000 square foot under roof, so we do have quite a large physical maintenance and so forth. So, Representative, our intention is to become as self-sufficient as possible as soon as we can. I can't give you an exact date on that, but improvements like these roadways, that event helps generate over $200,000 a year revenue for us.
Being 80% state funded
To 80% self-funded. Yes, sir. So.
considered going into public transportation.
I'll leave that for someone else to answer.
Thank you. I don't see any more lights.
The other agency, Mr. Chairman, if I can just say a minute on, I'm also the acting executive director of the Agarama Development Authority in Tifton. And if I may, let me just pass out a couple brochures. Basically, the Agarama down at Tifton is a 95-acre site. It's the historic village. It's the museum. The State's Museum of Agriculture is located there. A few years ago, myself and my staff got involved with it. We do have a full-time program director and staff down in Tifton. But basically, in the governor's recommendation, it calls for $300,000 in improvements. It's quite a site. Hopefully, you all have been down there, but we're talking about 1870s to 1910 historic village, blacksmith shop. We've got a woodworking mill, a printing press, schoolhouse, an old church. I mean, it's quite a facility down there. It's very impressive. We have a lot of students and school groups that come through that facility. It has not had any major improvements besides the Museum of Agriculture. That was completed last year. and that is the State's Museum of Agriculture. It's quite a facility, but we do need money for general improvements and some maintenance, and this $300,000 would help us upgrade the electrical requirements so we can have more festivals and things down, arts and crafts show to help generate more money in that regards. We need a new restroom for the school groups at the east side of the grounds. So basically that's some money that we need to make general improvements to the Agarama down in Tifton. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Representative Black has a question. Have you ever had any discussion down there about removing that berm of dirt along that highway like that?
That's a good question. I'm a firm believer that if you can see the facility, you get more people through it. If you take a look at the Agri Center in Perry, we have almost 1 mile of frontage that you can see from interstate. When you go south, especially to the Agarama, there's a berm up there. If we could get someone to take down that berm, you could see the beautiful new building. You could see the site a lot better. I think it would help market the facility. And we do have areas down there on our 95 acres. We could take that dirt from the berm and fill in a bunch of low spots. And we got a lot of water area down there, a low-lying area. But that would be a tremendous improvement. So if anybody got any suggestions or got any inside contacts with the Department of Transportation, maybe we could slide that out and open up. I mean, it'd be tremendous. You'd have a tremendous view of the facility.
None of that land is on the state right away, is it not?
I can't answer that, but it's from what I know about it, you could take that down 10, 20 feet, and I mean, it'd be no problem. But I'm not an engineer, so I don't.
Has there been any discussion to make the developers think where about this dirt available when you get at no cost? I dealt with a situation down in Valdosta, and there was a berm of dirt that was shielding some property, and part of it was on the state right of way, and there was actually there's I think a prohibition against letting somebody else go, was on there to get that dirt, on the government, and I know they had to bring the school board in. They could give it to the school board could get it, but the developers couldn't get it. But they got it moved.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just mainly letting some people know there was some dirt they could get there.
But we probably could use that dirt right there on the site, probably.
Not
Yeah.
on the highway, because it's not on the highway, it's on state property, because the state owns this facility. But I think, the authority is different from the DOT.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that, the fellow that owned the land down there, and the developer wanted the dirt. The fellow wanted to give it to him, but because some of that dirt was over on the highway, they couldn't give it to him, and he couldn't come get it. But they worked out a deal where they give it to the school board came, got it, and got reimbursed for getting it from the.
We've addressed some of that on state institutions and property where surplus property becomes available and it has to be put out in a way as surplus property. But it can be then handled through the state institution property.
Thank you, Representative Black. I hope that you're able to help with that.
I have one
Yes,
short question. In Tifton, there is a Chamber of Commerce and there's a Bureau of Trade and Tourism.
Visitors Bureau, yes.
Bureau,
Mm-hmm.
of which I think the funding through hotel, motel tax department.
Yes.
Is there any cross-funding with the Agarama between those two agencies? It seems that they are great beneficiary of the Agarama.
Yes, the city has given us about $26,000 a year, and the Hotel Motel Visitors Bureau tax has given us an additional $26,000 a year. So it's a little over $50,000 a year that we're getting from them. Yes.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights on. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming today. Do we have any other attached agencies here? Yes, sir. You can introduce yourself to us and tell us which attached agency that you're representing.
Yes, sir. I would appreciate that. My name is Eric Pfeiffer. I'm the Executive Director for the Georgia State Games Commission. Actually, I have two small things. May not be on a tracking document, but let me pass these out real quick.
Ms. Pfeiffer, I know it's not your fault. You're lucky. One of the last ones here, but I might say it correctly to be in your favor.
I fully understand that, and I appreciate that. And actually, just to prelude that, I actually do not have an 06 request because that's actually not what we're there. But I'll just give a little brief about who we are and a few of those things. Our mission is actually to develop, operate, educate amateur sports, physical fitness, and health for all Georgians. Breaking it down, we've got a few divisions: our physical fitness education division, sport tourism division, programming division, operations, and youth fitness. It's a combination with the physical fitness education division. We were created back in '89, basically as one of the predecessors to attracting the Olympics to Atlanta. That we were one of the prerequisites. We are very similar to my predecessor, who actually just was up here from the Agarama. As you can see on the appropriations history, we're based around $200,000. That was only cash. We actually do a tremendous amount. Actually, our overall budget, if you put it together, would have been about $1.7 million. We get about $1 million of in-kind services and products a year, and that's actually one of my main jobs, is making sure that we get that each and every year. We bring in over about $32 million a year in economic impact, half in Atlanta, half outside Greater Atlanta. We're kind of like the axle of a wheel. You got all the spokes coming in. A lot of times you never see it going on or anything else, but it's the linchpin of many other small entities and other things all combining for the larger good. Whether you're talking all kinds of other nonprofits, amateur sports, local governments, convention bureaus, all kinds of things. In a lot of those areas, we're actually one of the things behind the things, even though most entities actually never hear about us. So I'll actually, aside from that, I guess the only other thing I'll mention is that we kicked off our Lighten Up Fitness, Lighten Up Georgia, which I handed a brochure out last year, and over 32,000 activity miles were logged, and over 7,000 pounds were lost just in its first year. When I first took over, we had 10 full-time staff, and now we have 1. So that's just so I've actually lost 90% of my staff, and we're actually able to we're still plugging away with we're basically 99.5% volunteer driven. I'm actually the only individual that's actually has any type of pay. So I'll open up to any questions you guys have.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you coming today. I don't see any questions, and thank you, sir.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
There couldn't be many more. Is there any other attached agency? I believe that that concludes it, and concludes this hearing today. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we meet back here